Hello, and welcome to Bold Leadership. I'm Colin Poular, and along with my co-host Kavis Reed, we explore a wide-ranging set of discussions on leadership. It involves exploring entertaining conversations about the challenges, learnings, ups and downs, and fundamentals of leadership. Our podcast interviews female leaders in business, politics, community, athletics, and across a whole range of ages. Today's guest is Dr. Craig Dowden, best-selling author of the book Do Good to Lead Well and A Time to Lead. He's a TED Talk speaker and a Keynote speaker. He's written for the Financial Post and is also on the Forbes List of writers. We're having a great leadership talk with a lot of laughs.
For me, great leadership starts with great self-leadership. So how can I expect to lead a team, an organization, if my own house is in disarray? And this is a lifelong process. That's also important. It's why I called it mastering yourself. 2 words. It's mastering because it's continuous.
We don't edit a whole lot.
That's great. It's raw, in the raw.
Do I just wait?
Oh man. Yeah. Oh man. Hey, we got Craig.
Hey. Came in at the tail end of the crow story.
Oh. The doctor's in the house. But and before I even get a chance to get rolling into introduction, so we don't edit a whole lot.
That's great. It's raw, in the raw.
In the raw. Hey, Kavis, let me introduce you to Mr. Craig Dowden. And Craig, this is Kavis Reed.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Craig.
Same here.
Craig, are you are you in Ottawa or are you in Newfoundland? Okay.
Right now, yeah.
Okay. Did you get a chance to visit home?
So I flew my mom up for the holidays, which was great. So she came up Wednesday and then flew back yesterday morning. So which is great. So brought Newfoundland to me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Kavis, have you been to Newfoundland?
No, I've been to Halifax a couple of times in Moncton.
Yeah, but that's not.
Yeah,
that's not Newfoundland.
That's not the real. That's not the real deal. That's not the real deal.
Whenever they say coast to coast, from Halifax to Vancouver, I'm like, no, you got to keep going east.
Yeah. I've had the chance to be out there 3 times here in the last 2.5 years, and one for business and a couple of times for competition. And I've loved it. It's only been in St. John's, and I've had a chance to kind of see a little bit of the coastline, but absolutely loved it. Loved the people were wonderful with me. I got a chance to find out that I wasn't a townie. I was really a bayman. I make a better bayman than a townie. So that whatever. So Kavis, you may not know what that means.
No,
but Craig could educate you if necessary.
Yeah, exactly. We can take this offline. I can do a webinar in like 30 minutes on the history of, Bayman and Townie. So, and I'm sure that will go viral for sure.
Oh, man. Well, so Kavis, okay. When did you hit this crow? You have to tell me about this crow story before we get rolling. En route. Does Darlene know about the crow?
Oh yeah, she knows about the crow.
Oh, okay, all right.
The entire family's in the car. I usually drive, and they usually sleep, and the roads weren't bad, but they were sketchy, and I'm a careful driver during the wintertime. And I'm always scanning for wildlife, always, so going to rural Saskatchewan. But anyhow, the car in front of me interrupt the crows having their meal on the side of the road, and a whole flock of them. And as soon as they start to fly away, I go, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. And I forgot to honk my horn. And as soon as I thought to honk my horn, wham, this big thud. It's about -20, and I know with the way cars are designed now, something's broken, something's damaged. It is going to cost a lot of money. So, so I checked to make certain that the Crow was, out of this misery, and otherwise you have to go back and do what you need to do. But it was, I think, dead on impact. So anyhow, confirmed he was down for the count, and I kept driving. I'm thinking, do I stop now? I got 2 hours left on this trip, this drive. Do I want to be angry for 2 hours of the drive? Or do I just keep going and figure out the damage later? I figured I'll just keep going, count my blessings, be thankful. No one's hurt. The animal is out of its misery. When we stopped for gas, I decided to go around and look. The bumper is split. The fog light is
No more.
it doesn't exist anymore. So I'm trying to keep my cool, going, okay, is this going to be one where you call insurance, or is this one you're going to you have to just bite the bullet? If it's my car, it would just be taped. Duct tape, and we'll keep going.
MacGyver.
Like the red-green show.
But being it's the wife's car, I'm holding my breath. I called Herber's. Free advertising. We got to charge them for the promotion.
There you go.
To get an estimate on January 6th, and I'm pretty sure the entire bumper is going to have to be replaced. But here's the funny part. The same carcass that was there when we were going that caused me to hit this Crow is still on the side of the road. And they're still feasting.
Well, it's kind of like leftovers at Christmas, Kavis. You just kind of keep nibbling for days. It's not just one meal, man. Oh.
Yeah, so me and traveling Colin just does not go well.
Well, so that's traveling from Edmonton to Macklin.
Yes. Yes.
The metropolis of Macklin, Saskatchewan. Craig, I don't know. Have you spent any time in really Saskatchewan, Alberta?
Spent some time in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Traveled, Calgary, Edmonton, around that area, Red Deer. So haven't had any episodes like Kavis. We'll steer clear of that, although now I've added that to my list. But
things
great.
not to do, Craig.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Winter in the prairies is always interesting. We just had it gets really dry. So this, Craig being in Ottawa, cold is wet cold, and Saskatchewan, Alberta, it's a dry cold, and it gets dry. So we went from what was it a week ago, Kate? Was it
minus 41?
Minus 41 with the
with the wind chill,
and, so 30 something plus wind, and then it got really nice out, and then it dumped about 15 centimeters of snow, and 15 or 20, something like that. And so it's snow. It's Saskatchewan. You got to clear the snow. Well, it snowed, and then another day later, it rained. So it went from from one end to the other. So it rained, and then it froze again. So everything had this thick layer of ice on there. I mean, you were using a chisel and a hammer to clear the ice off the vehicle. So that's that's a prairie winter here. So that's a pretty normal week. That's a pretty normal week for us.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Pretty normal half of our year.
Yeah. But and then outside of that, this dry cold. It's amazing how Kavis looks as good as he does, because we have to use as much lotion just to keep the skin hydrated.
There we go.
And all that kind of stuff. So so if you ever do a visit out here with us and we meet up, I'm gonna, the traditional gift is going to include some hand lotion.
We got lots of tips on this already. So skincare regimen,
skincare, how to avoid the crows.
Yeah, exactly. Travel. This is a full buffet of insight. Yeah, that's right.
So, folks listening to this podcast, welcome, Craig. Craig Dowden is a PhD and a guest on our show. I had the opportunity to meet Craig in Ottawa a few weeks ago. I was Kavis, as we were talking before. I was there with my responsibilities with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce meetings, and we got introduced by David Smith, who's been a guest on our show a couple of times. And so David introduced Craig and I by a quick email. So while I was in Ottawa, Craig messaged me directly and said, well, maybe we can connect in the next little bit. And I said, well, great. As soon as I get back from Ottawa, I'll call you. He says, oh, you're in Ottawa. He goes, yeah, well, I'm in Ottawa. So I had no idea. And so I just, I'm in the meetings, trying to look professional in the meetings, of course, right, doing my delegate work. And so I just took a little break, went out and called Craig, are you really in Ottawa? And a couple hours later, we were sitting in the restaurant in my hotel. So Craig had some great hospitality right off the bat, and it was like getting together with an old friend. Craig, I've had a chance to read both of your books, bestseller, Do Good to Lead Well. And your second book is a Time to Lead, which included a collaboration with Alan Mulally and Sarah McArthur. And you've been on a book tour for like the last 2 months, signing all over the place. Like I go online and you're like in New York, and then you're in Vancouver, and then you're in Toronto, and like where have all the places you've been to sign this thing?
Yeah, you've pretty well captured them. New York, Vancouver. So it was great to be in New York for the official launch, and we had Barnes & Noble on Fifth. So it was great experience. And then did a live stream with Alan. So Alan zoomed in and joined us at the publisher's office, and then did a signing in Vancouver and Toronto. Going to be in Calgary. So talking about Alberta, so be in Calgary at kind of later January. So I'll be able to bring these tips with me, put them in my bag, and off I go. And doing an event in Ottawa, it looks like, as well, and exploring a couple other cities. So which is really great. Be able to get out, meet people, and have some fun, engaging conversations about life and leadership.
That's awesome. And Craig, you live full time in Ottawa. You've got your partner, family there, and so again, that's where I had a chance to meet Craig. Craig, one of the big reasons I wanted to get both you and Kavis on the line here today is because there's a few things you've got in common.
Brace yourself.
This is your life. Yeah. Like, I know this. That was friendly. Come on, it's going to be lots of fun and laughter, and just kind of, it's like, come on in. It's safe, warm in the water, and then off we go.
Wham.
Yeah, that's right. So,
well, no, I'm serious. I mean, you both worked in talent management. If I remember correctly, right? Because Craig, you worked in a talent management firm for a number of years, and Kavis, you've got a very similar background. Worked in HR recruitment for 17 years, 15, 17 years, something like that. Kavis has been the general management role or senior executive role, and certainly in the sports realm, and also on boards in business sector, and so I thought it'd be kind of cool when I met Craig that maybe the three of us can chat, because I was reading a bit of your background, even in the couple of hours I had before we met in person. So like I said, it felt like we were like old friends now, right? But I mean, and I read the Financial Post, and it's I'm like, wait a minute, I have read some of your articles in the Financial Post, and you're in the Forbes List, and you've been doing executive coaching, and that's how we met that's how my connection with David Smith through to you. And what I really found cool was a lot of the work you've been doing around positive leadership, because that's really been the essence of Kavis and my conversations around how do we become, how do we develop ourselves and help others who are interested in leadership develop to become more positive leaders, have positive impact, and maybe challenge some of the things that we thought is status quo, as you kind of mentioned in your first book, kind of the status quo leadership model that we've particularly been challenged with. So so that's the reason I wanted to get you all together.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
all right. Yeah, I was wondering what was coming out here. So yeah, exactly.
But so Craig, would you be okay to maybe just tell us a little bit about how the path went? Because I mean, you started in a firm, and then you did some stuff at school, and then you got an executive. How did this trajectory? Because it wasn't a straight line. It couldn't have been a straight line.
No, not even close to a straight line. And when I was growing up, I was just always fascinated by what makes people tick. So I was just fascinated by human behavior and relationships, and then how different people could look at the same situation very, very differently. It's like they almost were watching two different movies. And I just thought that was so intriguing. And whenever my friends had any challenges, they'd come to me to talk about them, and I would ask lots of questions. So, which led me to psychology. And then I found out about psychology and business, which I thought was also incredibly fascinating. We each have personalities. Organizations have personalities. You mesh them together, and in my mind, I was never going to be bored. So fortunately, I was right. And then wanted to pursue a graduate degree. Actually did my master's in forensic psychology, criminal justice psychology. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Only hear it here, right?
So this is kind of a CSI kind of
that's
mix
right.
in there too. All right. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, I did that. And then as I explored more, being at the criminal justice conferences, came across consulting psychology and business psychology. And so really wanted to dive deeper into that space. And in particular, for me, I was passionate about bridging the gap between science and practice. I always thought research and practice was just this fascinating combination, and had the good fortune of reading Daniel Pink, who everyone knows now is the multiple New York Times bestselling author. One of his earliest books was Free Agent Nation. And it was around how free agents, he's always been able to have this masterful ability to predict the future. And he talked about how free agents were going to rule the world of work. And I was fascinated by entrepreneurship. And so that's what I did for my dissertation. And then, as you pointed out, once I finished my PhD, was able to take on a managing director role in a talent management firm in Ottawa, was recruited for a managing director role in Toronto, and then basically started my own, went out on my own about 8 years ago. So it's just been a wonderful journey ever since.
That's cool. So Kavis is not so bad.
No. I was bracing for impact, but Craig, one of the things I read in some excerpts that Colin sent me, and some research myself, is you talked just briefly about it, and then in your books you kind of organize around it, the personalities of companies. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that just a little bit more? Because a lot of people might go, what does that mean, the personality of a company or a firm?
No, it's a great question, and really it's the intangible. It's essentially culture in a lot of ways. It's the way we do things around here. That classic expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. and it's all around. So I find that personality of the organization, it's how, when you walk into any organization, how do you feel? How does it look? What's the energy that's within it? And those interpersonal relationship dynamics. And they really power whether or not we excel or whether or not we struggle. There's a lot of great psychological research that shows that emotions are contagious. So whether or not I'm excited to show up at the office every day or if I'm dreading it, well, guess what? That's not only going to impact me, it's going to impact my colleagues. And hey, as a leader, I'm going to have a disproportionate impact on the mood of my organization. And so that's what I love. You know, it really intrigued me that there are lots of great business ideas out there. There are lots of highly efficient organizations that are out there, yet that the personality is the secret sauce. And so you can find countless examples where an organization has all the tools in place to be successful, funding, great idea, product, marketing strategy, and then the relationships, right, come together and really can undermine that. So to me, I think it's such a powerful influence or foundation, if you will, about how any organization, be it professional, like a business organization, a community organization, a family, it has a personality. So
Thanks for that. And I really would like to go down this path, Colin, because it's from a GM coach perspective, you always said putting together a group of personality is very, very delicate. That ecosystem is very delicate, and you have to be very careful the personalities you introduce in there. Uh, can you please help me if you from a leadership perspective, should your attention be more on understanding the personalities you're bringing together, or should you focus half on the personality, a little bit on the personality, and the end goal of the organization, which they always say is the bottom line? But as you said, if you don't have the people driving the culture and the environment, you may be compromising the bottom line. So, what's the priority for a leader in terms of putting the personalities together?
yeah, I think you have to be very mindful of that, and is one of the reasons it influenced the title of my first book, "Do Good to Lead Well." It's because a lot of times people think, "Oh, well, you have to lead through fear and aggression and drive, and that's going to lead to positive results." And the evidence is quite contrary. You know, when you have positive emotions, positive relationships, it leads to exceptional business outcomes. Sports outcomes. I mean, you name it, any collective of individuals brought together. And so, as a leader, it's essential to understand each of the individuals who are part of your team, no matter how large the team is, and what makes them tick individually. And then it's essential to recognize now, how do all of those personalities come together? Because I mean, you can use a sports analogy where you've got great individual contributors, like amazing talent, and they underperform as a collective because they're not meshing. And I love how you comment on the sacredness of bringing those personalities together. And once you've got that sense of almost micro macro, okay, I understand each of the pieces, I understand how they fit together. Then also you want to integrate, now where are we going? And how are we going to get there? And then what is the role that each of these individuals can play? And what is the role that each of these individuals think they can play? And now you have these amazing conversations on multiple levels, individually and collectively, about how we're going to get there. And that, to me, again, and I'll raise my hand and admit my bias, that's why I wanted to pursue psychology, is that that's such a fascinating series of conversations to have. And it's less about the components, it's really about the intermixing of those components and the awareness of those components and the psychology underlying them. So,
one of the things I really appreciate about your book, and even listening to you now, is just in my own journey. My initial understandings of leadership, those changed dramatically as I began to get exposed to the kinds of roles and responsibilities associated with leadership, where I thought it was very much, the business acumen, the technical elements that were the most important things to being a successful leader, whether that be in I call it the two-person popsicle stand kind of business, or something that has dozens or hundreds or even thousands of people working together. And the ideas of some of the things, the pillars that you talk about in your book, I always heard that as being, the soft skills, like they were less important than the hard skills. But in actual practice, over time, I realized the hard skills were kind of useless unless you figured out how to deal with with the soft skills. What people were traditionally calling the soft skills, which I read through your book, and the impression I got is that these are probably the most important skills, and especially the times that we're in, the most important skills that we could have. And, yeah, we have to know how to put the widgets together, but we really don't need to be the experts on that. We're assembling a team that can, that has the mix of technical, but we got to make sure the interpersonal pieces and the kind of the essence, I guess is the term I'm looking for, existed. But like I said, the kind of the status quo is that these two were in competition with one another, but that's not at all what you're saying. Like you're saying these not just integrate, but they are a powerful combination when you put it together.
And it's a great insight. And one of the best book titles of all time is Marshall Goldsmith's "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." Right around that transition to coming back to, and I love that's the spirit of this podcast, which is, so how do we each of us commit to being the best version of ourselves as possible so that we can lead ourselves and inspire and lead others. I think that's just the ultimate pursuit. And so that book title continuously rings strongly with me. And I think when you look at things, once again, you can have the best widgets, the best idea. So let's pull one as an example. And those pillars come from, because this is important as well for me. In both of the books, I went through decades of research to highlight those qualities, those skills that have been heavily researched, and the evidence has come out as overwhelmingly positive around their role in being effective leaders and driving not just great human connection and human relationships, extraordinary bottom line performance, because that's necessary for an organization to not just survive, to thrive. And so, as an example, humility. How can we exist in the world today without some measure of humility? I mean, things are changing so rapidly, so quickly. And people from all over have extraordinary access to information. It's coming in so quickly. So what we need to do is create a space where we can openly share information and pivot. When you listen to any of the top thought leaders' articles about what you need to survive and thrive in the business world today, it's agility, adaptability, flexibility. Well, how are you going to do that if you're egotistical and narcissistic? That's going to be a bit of a challenge. I mean, those words are rarely stated with that kind of personality. So you've got to be able to do that. As well as, and here's another one, and it's something I wrote about in my latest book, was around mastering our emotions, right? People constantly talk about, well, it's business, not personal, it's business. Like, no. if it's all robotic, sure, all right, yeah, absolutely. You put human beings together in any form or function, emotions come with us. And what I love about emotions is that they're the secret sauce, right? You don't get engagement through analysis, and I'm not going to think my way into it. I'm going to feel it, right? When I'm excited about being here, when people are listening to your podcast, they pick up on your energy, right? That's why they're here. And you can have the same conversation between two different people. They're not going to come back and listen like they do your podcast because of the energy. Right away, there's a positivity, there's a joy, there's an exploration, right? That's what gets people excited. And so rather than trying to shy away from emotion in business, it's essential to acknowledge it and say, how do we capitalize on this? How do we bring more of it, the positive, right, that energizing force, into the work that we do?
Yeah. Craig, I truly believe read a lot and studied a lot on servant leadership. And you often heard, and people keep saying it, we always have to preface that humility is not a weakness. It's actually a strength. And it's sad to say that we have to preface that when we speak about something so important in every aspect of our lives, no one like an arrogant individual that is narcissistic and the world revolves around them. When you look at this from a leadership perspective and we're trying to challenge the norm, we're trying to get people to think differently. All throughout our lives, we're at that age where we can probably say what we thought as leaders when we looked at it was that stern-faced military guy that was going to whip us into shape and command our respect. Is there a challenge to that? Can we have the same in humility and have that same kind of sternness and decisiveness?
For sure. I think there are so many wonderful places to go with that observation, Kavis. And I think so. I had the privilege of interviewing Doug Cohen. He's the former CEO of Campbell's, and engineered one of the most profound engagement turnarounds in the history of the Gallup. So Gallup organization tracks engagement data for decades. And when Doug Cohen took over, Campbell's pretty well at the bottom. When he left, they were pretty well at the top. People were just amazed. And I love this expression he shared with me, right? I'm tough on standards and I'm soft on people. And I think, and I love that. And what is interesting, and it's already, a thread in our conversation, which I think this is just a natural thing that we as humans do. We simplify and we often dichotomize. Well, I can be successful or I can be nice. And we see them as competing. And what I love about what Doug shared, it's an and, right? It's, well, how I can be tough on standards and soft on people. So how do I do both of those things? And that's why I'm so passionate about positive leadership, because in some cases people think, oh, well, let's all sing and hold hands and just kind of, and the ship is sinking and, oh, it's great. Don't worry about it. We're taking on more water. This is fantastic. And that's not what it is. That's right. Yeah. And everyone's up out my Newfie roots, right? Doing the jig and all excited. And then how do you, that's not viable. It's not sustainable. And so what's really important is that, hey, I can pursue excellence and I don't have to rip myself apart or other people apart to do it. And in fact, what's going to facilitate that? What's going to facilitate that is creating an environment where that can naturally come to the surface.
In your, the other pillars of the book, when you put all this together, Craig, and I've been finding that as the folks in either in the organization that I work with and as a CEO there, or with other organizations where I'm on a board, I'm spending far more time talking to them about things like energy and focusing on positive elements, on the self-awareness, huge amounts of time on the conversations that are about self-awareness, recognizing and taking the time not to be hard on yourself, but to recognize, hey, there's opportunities for me to improve, to get better, to maybe the way that I carried myself into that last meeting wasn't my best, and be open to having other folks kind of point that out in a way that to make you better. And so I've been finding myself spending more time with that. I think I might have mentioned this to you back when you had you'd host a session with Howard Behar, and I said that somebody had come to me and said, I'm finding myself longer in this role. Suddenly, I'm finding myself to become more compassionate. And that was not their background. They came from a very technical background, work with Fortune 500 companies in a very technical role, now finding themselves in senior leadership and using words like compassion in the middle of a sentence and almost being a little embarrassed about saying that to me. And I thought that was the most insightful thing. And it struck me. And, while that would not be considered coaching in the traditional sense, I found it was a great opportunity to have conversation with somebody who was likely to become a senior leader, senior executive in an organization, either here or elsewhere, just because of where they are in their development.
Mm. Well, and I love that you mentioned self-awareness, and if we think about that for a moment, we each have a view, a self view of who we think we are and how we're showing up, right? And so then that's going to drive our perception of things. Yet in many cases, and there's so much, again, psychological research around this in terms of the self-serving bias, which our view of ourselves can be highly inaccurate and often is quite inaccurate. And so in order for us to show up as the best version of ourselves and have the impact that we want to have on other people and on our circumstances, it's vital for us to receive feedback from our environment, because I'm likely going to be the most biased source of how I'm showing up, because I'm going to think I'm doing amazing, or else I wouldn't be doing it that way. So,
and when you're in a CEO role, people always laugh at your jokes, no matter how bad they are.
Right.
So sometimes you're not really getting unfiltered feedback.
Right. And you need that. In every situation. And what's a common refrain that I hear, or common complaint in my coaching practice or conversations I have with teams or organizations that I'm working with, is that, oh, well, I wish I knew that sooner. Or why didn't you tell me that sooner? Yeah. Right? Like, because and Alan, who you mentioned earlier, who I collaborated with on this book, he said so many insightful observations, and he said, you can't manage a secret. So right. We can't manage a secret in organizations. We also can't manage a secret in terms of ourselves. So what we want to do is create the conditions where we can access that information, either about the project of me or the project we're working on, so that then we can ultimately have the impact that we desire to have.
Can't manage a secret. That is I'm going to say a famous line of the board chair that hired me in my first CEO role. and he would say, Colin, you can't fix a secret. You can't fix a secret. He would say that to me all the time, right?
Yes.
And so to hear that Alan and others have said the same kind of thing, like, okay, this is cool. Obviously they've gone through the same kind of growth. In your second book, Time to Lead, you acknowledge. I thought this was, timing wise, was a fantastic book, and thanks for signing this book for me. I think I made David jealous. He won't admit it, but I made sure I showed it to him, and he's like, "Oh no, that's great." I could tell in his eye that he was a little bit. But
I'll have to write an email after this.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it'll make him feel better.
That's right.
But like in your second book, you acknowledge. That leaders are working through the most difficult times in our history, really complicated times. And I would say, over the last couple of years, both, just from a formal leadership position, as well as, in volunteer roles, whether that be on boards or, involved with the chamber, and seeing lots of business leaders and having those relationships. The thing that you call VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times that we're in. Everything from, challenges that people have had being isolated, and, for long periods of time, not being close to their coworkers, sometimes being able to put a bit of a facade on how well things are going because we've got these devices in front of us, and the same ability for you and I and Kavis to connect. When do we turn off our cameras and shut off our computers? What's life really like for us inside? We can work ourselves up to look good in front of this little box, but really, the rest of the room could be a disaster. The rest of our lives could be a disaster. And the things that you talk about navigating, you talk about these 7 areas to master in your life, and I think it's something that both Kavis and I really appreciated, because we've spent some time doing we did a debrief on the book by Carol Dweck, Mindset, and you talk about mindset. We did a debrief with a team of people together. We talk about being a master of your strengths. And, as I shared with you personally, working with Tom Rath's book on strength finders. And so, those kinds of elements, you talk about these areas of mastery to be able to move forward. How would you want to talk a bit more about the context of it? Because this is really an interesting time we're in, and why we felt it was really important to carry a podcast that was fun, and we spent a lot of time laughing at each other, but was also really meaningful for people who are developing or just kind of, as saying goes, going through it.
Absolutely, and going back to your point, and we are in a VUCA-fied world, a VUCA world, and it's been gaining steam for many years, and that's something I would say as well. That's important for the context, Colin, in terms of, these trends that we're really living through now have been happening for quite some time. So as an example, remote work wasn't, that was happening pre-pandemic. Right. I would say even more importantly, like mental health, that was a burning platform and issue for many, many years. And we just were, as we sometimes can do, not paying full attention to it because things were staying together. And then when COVID hit, boom.
Yeah, it blew apart. Yeah.
It blew apart. And so environmental, social justice, so many things, again, that have been operating have come front and center. So you're absolutely bang on that this is, when has there ever been a more complex time to lead where you're not just managing the bottom line, you're managing so many different things, and that people are expecting you to comment on a lot of different areas and issues that just wasn't part of leadership just a few short years ago. And so, and I really appreciate your question because, and this was the genesis of the book, was that for me, great leadership starts with great self-leadership. So how can I expect to lead a team, an organization, if my own house is in disarray? And this is a lifelong process. That's also important. It's why I called it mastering yourself. 2 words. It's mastering because it's continuous. This isn't, I wake up tomorrow and, hey, congratulations, high five, I've mastered me. No, the longer we go, the more complex it gets, the more layers that we're peeling back. And so then, and where that came from was exactly what you're talking about, which is during the pandemic, people were wondering, how are we going to get out of this? Which really underneath that was like, how am I going to get out of this?
Right,
like, how do I need to rally myself and get myself ready? And so, and what I wanted to do was go through the research. Again, that's why I wanted to pursue my PhD. I wanted to have access to, understand, reference evidence-based insights, because there's lots of different opinions and ideas and models. I wanted to go through the research and say, now, what has consistently found to be important for us to be at our best personally and professionally? And so the 7 qualities: mastering your mindset, mastering your emotions, mastering your resilience, mastering your strengths, mastering receiving feedback well, mastering difficult conversations, and mastering authentic leadership. These have continually shown to be important. And I love, to your point, exactly why mastering our mindset was the first chapter, and the fantastic work of Carol Dweck, which was an important foundational piece of that opening chapter, which is our mindset impacts so much. So if I'm walking into this conversation going, oh, this is going to be torturous, and we're going to have a terrible time, and well, guess what? Like, that's going to impact my energy and impact how we relate to one another. And same thing, right? Like, how you're looking at me, our mindset strongly impacts our experiences. And so to not recognize that, again, that softer skill, yet whether I see something as a problem or as an opportunity, it's going to influence the choices I make. It's going to influence the things that I say. So you cannot put a price tag on how vital that is, to look at what we're thinking and how we're thinking.
Well, the great thing that I really appreciate about the book, and I'm actually going to go through it again because it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to use it as a tool that has a set of tools in there. And I really appreciate Alan Mulally's role in it in kind of framing. Here's the class. Okay, so you read some theory. Right? you read the academic side of this. Now here's the application side. And it's something that I found really, really nice about your book, to be honest with you, is that I'm like, because I'm processing this, I'm like, okay, well, I'm reasonably smart. There's times that Kavis is far brighter the guy than I'll ever be, but I'm like, I think I'm reasonably smart, but how does this actually work for me? And I think it's important for somebody who maybe hasn't read your book or been on your website or anything like that to kind of understand some of the principles that you're able to shift from an academic perspective, where it was a lot of research and studying and stats, to how do I apply this in my day-to-day life? What things can I practice in my day-to-day life? And I think it'd be useful if you're able to talk a little bit about that and how and how he had kind of his role in that and why you decided to put that together.
No, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And that was the goal of creating the master classes. So, and whenever leadership books come out, and in conversations that I've had, people will say, oh, okay, well, it's particularly positive psychology or soft skills, right? They'll go, well, yeah, that's fine for a smaller boutique firm or a mid-sized this, but that won't happen in a publicly traded company or a Fortune 500 or a global or whatever. So one of the primary methods I wanted to use in putting together this book was that, okay, I'm going to have an evidence base. I'm also going to provide some evidence-based insight exercises from that. And now to address that criticism, right, that comes out, okay, well, tell me how it worked in one of these massive organizations. My initial goal was, well, I was going to have master classes from different executives, CEOs that I've coached. Okay. And then I had the amazing fortune of getting in touch with Alan, and who reached out to me. And then we started a conversation. And then I thought, wouldn't it be awesome to have master classes? So at the end of each chapter, which basically was able to consolidate the content that had been shared up to that point, and then this is how it applied. And then when Alan and I were speaking, I said, I can't think of anyone. He's led Boeing, commercial airplanes, and Ford, two of the most globally recognized, most complex organizations in the world. So, Alan, would you be open to teaching a masterclass in each chapter around how mastering our mindset applied within your working together management system, which produced extraordinary results? And so I just feel eternally grateful that he was open to the idea. And as we collaborated further, he agreed to sign on with Sarah McArthur, the co-editor-in-chief of Leader to Leader. And so we were able to essentially provide a masterclass at the end of each chapter that highlighted how these things came to life, again, during his tenure, his extraordinary tenure in two amazing organizations.
Listen to part 2. Best-selling author Dr. Craig Dowden, author of Do Good to Lead Well and A Time to Lead. You're going to have a great second episode.